So I'll show you what I brought. My copy of the environmental impact statement that was produced 17 years ago. Obviously, it's been in my shop. I found it. You know, it's still around. And what we're here tonight to do, and Greg Dorn will give us specifics about it, there is a proposal to develop a land use zone for the Bullfrog Flats. And our friends over here from Sun Communities, they're going to take that project on. Well, for them to be able to make a good decision about how to develop all that, the environmental impact statement has to be reviewed. And that's what our friends in PA are going to do, and our plan. And then after that, this all will help inform how things go with that development. So, in case you don't know, I am the mayor of Cleveland. I was here. All right, my name's on a lot of this stuff. It's been sitting on the shelf for a long time. So, a lot of things have changed, and so we have to look at it. And that's why we have you here, to look at this stuff with the comments. And it's real important to write down what it is you're concerned about, so that we can look at all those sort of things. So with that, I'll introduce Greg Dorn, who's our consultant planner that we have for the city, and he'll explain the nuts and bolts of all this.
Mayor, thank you very much. Does my voice carry okay to the back? In City Hall when I'm there, you can tell because people come and close all the doors to their offices, because I've been told I have an outdoor voice. But as the mayor said once again, if you don't know the mayor, Mayor Jay McGowan, Mayor of Cleveland, as he said, this is an opportunity to reintroduce a project to the community. And what we want to talk about tonight is give you a sense of what the project is and what the process is going to be that we're going to be going over probably at least the next year here in the community. So, once again, thank you all very much for coming out. This is a great turnout and a great opportunity to share some information. Many of you had your hand up as being here 17 years ago. For those of you that didn't, back in 2001 and 2002, the city received an application. It was reviewed and the city council approved a master plan and a development agreement to guide the future development of about 1,100 acres, known at the time, and perhaps still does, known as Bullfrog Flats. That 1,100 acres right out behind the school between Bullfrog Road, 903, and Interstate 90. That 1,100 acres is what we're talking about. And in 2002, a master plan was approved and a development agreement was approved for that 1,100 acres. And that master plan included the construction of about 1,334 housing units, a 74-acre business park, a dedication of land for a community recreation center, and the dedication of some land for about 50 units of affordable housing. That's what was included in the master plan that was approved back in 2002. That master plan also included the dedication of 175 acres for what is now the horse park, and 35 acres right here adjacent to the school for future expansion of the school. But for those two dedications, nothing has happened on the site since 2002. But the master plan said when the time comes, this is how that site is going to be used and developed. Now, during this past year, Suncadia, which is the owner of that 1,100 acres, or now a little bit less than 1,100 acres because of the dedications, came to the city and said, we are considering an opportunity to sell about 825 of those acres to another developer. And they would assume the responsibility for developing that 825 acres, and we would retain some of the acres, particularly the area that would be dedicated for the business park, and our intent would be at some point in time to continue with the development of the business park. That third party is an entity known as Sun Communities, and Sun Communities, as a builder, developer, manager, has developed over 380 different projects in the United States and Canada at this point that are either residential developments utilizing primary manufactured homes, or they are RV park resorts, or some combination of RV park, resort, and manufactured housing. So that's their background and experience. And when Sun Communities came to the city, they said, we are exploring and contemplating proposing some revisions to the master plan that was approved back in 2002. And the city said, you certainly can do that. That's within the city regulations, but the nature of the revisions that you're considering would require that those changes go back through public review and have a formal approval of those amendments. Now, in general terms, and we'll hear more about it tonight, but we'll definitely hear more about it in future meetings, the revisions don't change the number of dwelling units. It's still 1,334, but it reduces the number of single-family units and adds an RV park resort. So at the end of the day, the proposed revisions, as they've been explained to the city at this point, could include 484 single-family residences, 405 multifamily units, and 415 RV park resort slots, and 30 villas. So you do the math, they all add up to 1,334, but instead of being all single family and multifamily, it's single family, multifamily, and RV park resort. And that change of use is what led the city to say, you're going to have to reapply for the changes, and we're going to have to go through a public review and approval process. And since the environmental impact statement that the mayor showed was prepared in 2002, you're going to have to assess the environmental impacts associated with the change. How does the change affect things? Does it reduce the impacts? Does it increase the impacts? Does it change the impacts? So you're going to have to analyze the change. And since it was done in 2002, and we're not talking about Twinkies, the data is somewhat stale, and you're going to have to update it all. So the requirements are application to amend the master plan, but before you do that, there has to be an updating of the environmental impact statement, and you have to assess the proposed changes. That's why we're here, because we are now starting that process. The state law says that when you are doing an environmental impact statement, it encourages us to start it early in the process so that the project sponsor can use the information that comes out of the environmental impact statement to help with the design. So, some of us who like to know the answers to all of our questions right up front may find this part of the process a little bit frustrating because there aren't answers to all the questions at this point, but that's by design, because we want them to have the information to be able to use before they finalize their design. And I'll give you an example. Traffic. Let's make sure we have a good understanding of how traffic has changed since 2002 so that we can make sure that the project is designed to work with what we have now as opposed to what we had back in 2002. So there is going to be some ambiguity at this point, but that's by design. The steps are analyze, update, the environmental impact statement will go out for all of our review. The city manages the EIS process, and when the city says it's complete, then a final environmental impact statement will be issued, and then we can proceed with the formal application process. We'll all have an opportunity to review and comment on the amendments to the master plan, the amendments to the development agreement, and at the end of the day, the city council will decide whether to amend the documents or leave the documents the way they are. So we've got about a year together now to decide how best to proceed. We have an approved master plan, we know that. The question is, should it be amended, and if so, under what circumstances? So that's what it's about tonight. We'll have an opportunity for the development team to introduce themselves, to talk about their background, to talk briefly about the project. Once again, because we're in the preliminary stages, we won't be able to answer a lot of detailed questions, but we can at least get it started, and we've got the sheets all over the place so that we can make sure that we're getting all the questions down so that nothing gets lost as we proceed along the way. So, we're going to hear from the developers. We'll take some questions now. Then we're going to go to the EIS team, the team that's actually going to be updating the environmental impact statement. And then we're going to break into smaller groups and an opportunity. So if you want to talk to the traffic person or the wetlands person, or if you want to talk to the developer directly, you'll have an opportunity to do that. If you didn't sign the sign-in sheet, please do, because everybody that signs in the sign-in sheet is going to go on a master email list, and we'll send you emails every time there's new reports, new documents, meetings coming up. It'll be your best way to stay informed. You'll also always be able to go to the city website and check on your own, but we can do a better job of keeping in touch with you if you make sure that we've got your information before you leave. If a friend or a neighbor didn't get a chance to sign up, if you want to sign them in, great. Or take them one of the sheets and tell them when you get home, send the city an email and get on the list, and we can do that then too. So, Kurt, do you want to come up and...
I was going to go first.
Howard, do you want to come up and introduce Sun Community, a little bit about the project? Like I said, we'll take some questions, but we don't want to get too far into it. We want to make sure we get to the other things, and you'll have a chance to talk to Howard and Kurt directly. So, Howard.
Great, thank you, Greg. Good evening. My name is Howard Fingerroot, and I want to talk to you a little bit about Sun Communities and introduce ourselves to you. First and foremost, I appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk to you. Whenever we do projects, there is many people in the community that come out because they want to hear. It's like this land has been there for a long time, obviously, years and years, and decades, and we come and we're going to do something with it. One of the tenets that we have at Sun Communities is we want to be good stewards of the land. We want to work with the city. We want to work with the neighbors and come up with something that's the right project. And we think that this is going to be a wonderful, wonderful project. So let me just take a step back and talk about Sun Communities and who we are. Sun Communities is a company based in Southfield, Michigan. We are a real estate investment trust. So what that means is we're a publicly traded company. Our shares trade on the New York Stock Exchange. So it's a big company. It was started in 1975 in the state of Michigan. Today we have roughly 380 communities across the U.S. and Canada. We specialize in two types of communities, and Greg kind of pointed them out. First and foremost, about 2/3 of our portfolio are manufactured home communities. And what is a manufactured home community? You hear it in sort of three different types of nomenclature. One, it's obtainable housing. There's been an issue, and it's very much prevalent now throughout the U.S. is the affordability of houses and people to be able to own a house and to live close to their work, live close to recreation and whatnot. So the manufactured home communities that we own provide this. So it's obtainable housing, it's affordable housing, and it's something that we're one of the largest in the country, if not the largest in the country in this. And we pride ourselves in our management of those communities. So when you go into a Sun manufactured home community, you'll see the streets are kept up, all the home sites are kept up. We have amenities and programming for the residents. We divide these communities. We have some that are age restricted, they're 55 and over for more retirees or active adults, and then we have all age communities as well. So, like I said, about 2/3 of the communities we own are manufactured home communities, and they're spread out throughout the country. Then 1/3 of the properties that we own are RV resorts. And we really are setting the standard on what an RV resort is. We provide, we call them signature resorts, and they're highly amenitized. It's an affordable way to take a vacation. People with RVs we have different products within our RV resorts. And one of the things we kind of specialize in is putting together an amenity center. So when you come there, there's a lot of different amenities. There's the outdoor space and all the hiking, biking, camping, everything that you would normally see in a resort or a state campground, but we take it to a different level. We build clubhouses and pools and water parks, and we make it something for families to come and enjoy. And like I said, it's an affordable way, an affordable vacation, but we put a lot of luxury items in there, and they're just wonderful, wonderful resorts. We've built one, most recently, we have one in Granby, Colorado, about 2 hours outside of Denver. That's been fabulous. We have one in Central California that we just opened, one in the Carolinas, and we're finding more and more success because this is something, it's a new type of development. We're really setting the standard on RVs. They're just wonderful resort communities. So, again, the one thing, and I can't stress this enough because we've developed all over the United States, we do take pride in listening to the cities and working with the cities and working within all the rules and the ordinances. And I can say this, the SEPA process, the SEIS process that we're going through now, that we're kicking off today, is probably the most stringent process that I've run across throughout the United States. So I think you can sleep well at night knowing that your state government, your local government have gone to more than any other state to make sure that the environmental things are looked at and taken care of. So, I commend the state of Washington and local communities for having such a rigorous process. And again, some communities, I hope you'll see, we're hopefully up for the task, and we'll work to make sure that we do the right thing for you, for the city, and for our future residents as well. And with that, what I want to do is I want to call up Kurt Bellick. He is the person that's been behind the planning of this for Sun, and he knows the most about the specifics of the community itself. So I'll let Kurt do that, and then Greg, I know is running this. If there's questions at some point, we'd love to answer. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity to meet you.
Good evening. Again, my name is Kurt Bellick. I'm the project representative. I actually work for a company called Atwell, and what Atwell does for Sun Communities is we are essentially their land development consultant around the country. The projects that Howard talked about, we currently have, and I think just in general around numbers right now, we have 3 or 4 major projects like this, of this scale going on throughout the United States. I mean, they probably represent somewhere in the neighborhood of about $130 million worth of construction currently underway or about to be completed. Oh, thank you. So the plan obviously is displayed over here, but what I wanted to just take a few minutes to talk about is the key components of the plan. So when you guys walk around, look at it, if you haven't looked at it online, it's really 3 major components that Howard talked about. One is the RV resort, the other is the manufactured housing community,
And then as an element that's key and critical to the overall project is what we've called the spine road, the connector road. And so, as Greg said, this is a first pass. We've been through several iterations of this plan already, trying to refine it, make it better, looking at the issues that we already understand are going to come up as we go through the EIS process. Traffic, we know it's going to be an issue that we're going to have to tackle. And one of the key elements of the project that we've added to the scope of it, it is this concept of a spine road that kind of cuts through the development. So let me just start sort of high level. As Greg said, the overall property is Greg, is about 1,100 acres in total. What is in the yellow outline is about 827 acres. It's a big development, it's a big piece of property, but it's really important to note that our development area, when it's all said and done, is only about 213 acres of actual developed footprint. What that means is that all of the area from this ridge all the way down to the river is being set aside in open space. We've peeled off some additional acreage here, and then there's lots of areas within the development that if you look at this that you'll see are like shaded in this red color. Those areas that we're going to leave as permanent open space within the development.
Question, how many acres would that be?
Well, I mean, if you just do the math, there's 827 gross acres of property that we're purchasing, and we're developing just over 200. So it's 600 roughly, give or take, right? So the critical elements, again, RV resort, let's start there, because I'll just work my way from left to right. The RV resort, there's specific reasons at this point, and a lot of it we're going to be guided by this process that we're going to go through over the next year. We're going to see if our assumptions are correct about impact, particularly as it relates to traffic. But the RV resort is this area here, and when you get a minute later to come up and look at the plan, you can see. So the RV resort is sort of isolated from everything else. It's not intertwined with the residential development, and it has access directly out to Bullfrog Road. The manufactured housing development is all of this that you see in here, and there's different types, as was already mentioned, different types of housing. There's what we call multifamily housing, there's single-family housing. And that's really the balance of this, and then that spine road that I mentioned sort of cuts through the middle of all that. The reason why that's important is it provides another road, another point of access that ultimately gets you out to 903 rather than having all that traffic dumping onto Bullfrog Road. So some of these things we've already been looking at, trying to think about. And again, as we go through the EIS process, this will get refined. We'll find out what other changes need to be made. Within the development, then there's also, and again, if you look at the package that's posted online, there's what we call an adventure center. We're building something very similar at our project up in Granby, Colorado. It's exactly that. It's sort of a recreational amenity for both of the community at large as well as for the development, and that includes a number of things. We build mini golfs in them in many of the locations. We do very large climbing structures, all kinds of amenities. Again, recreational. They're open to the public, but it's also one of those elements that we like to build as to complement the RV resort. So we're going to be here. We can answer questions as sort of the rest of the process is explained to you, and we'll be around the rest of the night. So thank you.
Is there any general questions that of general applicability? And like I say, we'll have an opportunity for specific questions, but a general question.
Is this process updating the 2002 EIS, or is this a whole new EIS?
It's updating the 2002, so everything in it will be updated, and there'll be an additional alternative evaluated, which is this. So it's going to be both.
So it's not a complete new
No,
EIS?
no. Some other general questions?
Impacting the roads and traffic. Have they calculated the average daily trips in each one of these areas?
That's part of the analysis.
Can you repeat it?
Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, has there been a calculation of how many trips each of these areas generate, and then how does that relate to the capacity of the roads? And the quick answer is that's all a part of the traffic analysis that will be going through. Will be what's the capacity, what are the number of trips, what are the access points, and then there'll be traffic modeling done to help analyze that. And that modeling, by the way, is being done in conjunction with some work that the county has done to make sure that it's not just limited to this trip, but other things that are going on in the community. General questions.
Impact on the lake and the river.
It was analyzed before and it's going to be updated as a, yes.
How do they plan on having people commute to the lake and the river?
Oh, commute to.
Yes,
Okay.
because I know they put in, some idiots put in that egress road, which is not being used as an egress road, it's being used as access in and out. How does it affect that?
Okay, I'm going to make sure that we make note of that because that's more of a specific question. So we're going to make note of that and we'll have some follow-up discussion on that. But so the question is, we're concerned about folks that are there and how they get to where they want to go.
Yes.
Okay, yes, right here.
I just want to make sure that I understand at the beginning of this assessment process the impact on law enforcement, firefighting, and EMS, and what that's going to look like and what those agencies' needs will be when this is completed.
The question was, will the impact of this development on public services, police, fire, emergency response and emergency medical, will that be looked at? And will the needs of those service providers be taken into account? And the answer is it was studied in 2002. It is going to be updated now. And there are specific provisions in the development agreement that say as development occurs, there are going to be payments that will go to police and fire to help them with equipment and operating and things like that. All of that is going to be updated. Let's go here and then here. Once again, general questions. If you got a real specific one, we'll get to it, but maybe not now. But yes, sir.
On the RV component, am I understanding those are transient units?
Kurt or Howard, you want to speak to that? Are the RV units transient units, or is it going to be residential RVs? What's the?
So it's a combination of both, essentially, is that what you have is you have transient RV users.
You'll have transient sites, but you'll also have the opportunity to purchase essentially a seasonal pass, so they could stay there for the entire season. Does that answer your question?
It kind of does. I'm trying to.
Pardon?
I'm trying to calculate the.
Well, we haven't figured that out yet, as far as what the operating season really will look like.
Well, maybe the question is I know there's some RV parks where you can buy a pad or a spot in the RV park, so you're going to retain ownership of the RV.
Oh, 100%.
Okay, so those tax units, we're going to sell the slots. You guys will basically.
It's all rental.
Okay.
So it's either, and all I'm saying is that it's either a short term or a long term. So when you say transient, they might come for a week and then leave, 5 days less. A season, you might be there for 6 months, but you're renting it the whole time. There's no fee.
What about,
Go ahead.
let's rephrase that, just ask full-timers.
Meaning what?
Meaning if you're an RV full-timer, that's the term used at most of the RV parks, is full-timers are there year-round. So are those going to be allowed or no?
We haven't figured out if there's going to be a full season where you might have somebody that stays there the whole year. But if you're asking me if somebody's going to be able to live in the RV resort, the answer is no. I mean, that's usually the concern that we hear, is that people then turn it into a residence, and that's not going to happen.
You all own the Posh Mobile Swatch, correct?
Yeah, Copper Robles.
Sorry.
Yeah, so the question was, can the RV component be converted into full-time residential? And the answer was no. It's intended to be, the RV component is intended to be rental. The housing is the full-time component. Yeah, we'll go here and then over here.
Organization offering for activities for the children and the community to participate. What are you going to offer in return for the children? And are you going to have a pool that communities will go to, our children can go to, a park, the climbing thing that would be awesome? Thinking of the generation of children that the only swimming they could do for it, I'm like, which is crazy.
I'm going to try to rephrase it kind of in part as a statement of concern, and then also to see if there's any information that we have right now. The question has to do, to what extent is there going to be recreational opportunities associated with this project that the community can participate or take advantage or utilize? I know that there is one component, which is a dedication of land for a community recreation facility. Kurt, is there anything that you want to add to that? I mean, that will be something that is addressed as a part of the review, but is there anything you want to add in terms of preliminary design?
The swimming pool was one of the things that we're particularly interested in too.
Well, again, as Greg said, that there's a provision, it was contemplated in the original project that was approved that there would be a donation of 12 acres of land to the town. The town would decide what to do with that piece of property, whether it was a pool, it was baseball fields, I think at the time is what the thought was. Now pool has come up. But as part of this project, there is a 12-acre tract of land right here that is contemplated to be dedicated. The Adventure Center is what I was talking about. It's a separate piece of land. It's about 7.5 acres. And that will be built by Sun Communities, operated by Sun Communities, and that will include things like miniature golf, climbing structure potentially. Again, we do a lot of, we have a whole host of things that we can put into play there. We just haven't figured out what those might be. Laser tag.
I just want to add to what Kurt said. It's part of the original development agreement back in 2002. There was like 41 pages of conditions of approval. And as we went through the conditions of approval, some were applicable today, and I believe some of them aren't applicable. So as we get further on down the process with the city and the site planning, a lot of those answers will come out, but today they're unknown.
I think I said here, and then we were going to bounce over that way. So yes, right here.
So there's a lot of green space and undeveloped land in this plan. Who's going to own that land? Who's going to decide how it gets used? Who's going to maintain it?
Yeah, the question was, there's a substantial amount of open space depicted on the master plan. Who's going to own and operate and maintain it? And I believe the answer is that it would be owned and managed by Sun Communities, subject to whatever conditions of approval the city puts on it. That's right. Yeah. So it'll be privately owned, subject to conditions. Let's see, I think I said there, and then we'll go that way. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks. Number one, thank you to the city of Cle Elum and Lucy for explaining and getting information out to us so that we could have such a great turnout. My particular question that hasn't been asked yet is regarding what I would term as the buffer. I mean, I see that there's some dedicated open space, but it's primarily, at least based on what I saw without looking at these things, these big maps here, is that it was more towards between I-90 and your project, but not necessarily along separating your development from Bullfrog Road or 903. I saw from the depiction of the development, it was like, wow, they're right there next to the road, there might be 20 feet, but I mean, one of the nice things about us driving back and forth on Bullfrog and 903 is we've got trees, we've got animals, and I'm a little concerned that I'm not seeing much buffer there.
Yeah. And that will be, the question was, I see open space, I see some areas are buffered, particularly along Interstate 90. I'm not sure I see the same kind of buffers along Bullfrog Road, and I'll kind of maybe ad lib if you can and say, is that going to be something that is evaluated and reviewed as we go through the process? And the answer is yes.
It'll be reviewed, but so you're not giving us any information that the city or the developer is going to say, we're going to give you, 200 feet minimum from any main arterial, or that's...
Yeah, and that's where, because of where we are in the process, what they've said is this is what we're thinking of, and they haven't submitted the application yet. So what we're part of the reason for going through the environmental review is before they tighten things down too much is to be able to say, wait a minute, based on the environmental review, I think you need to reconsider this and this and this. It's always easier to avoid or minimize an adverse impact than it is to try to correct it later. So we're at the avoid and minimize right now point. So questions like, do we have adequate buffers and separation of areas are the kind of things that are being analyzed right now. So that, I think I said right over here, and then we'll go this way, yes. Bingo, bango, bongo, yes.
Yes, I'm Doug Kilgore from Roslyn, Washington. In 2002, when the original EIS was developed, these lands were subject to the Ridge Settlement Agreement with Trend West. That agreement provided for a reduction in 865 residential units within the resort and an addition of 550 acres of open space. Now in 2010, Trend West's successor, New Suncadia LLC, managed to get that agreement torn up by a local judge. And so none of those conditions apply. 865 units now will get built in the resort that weren't going to be built in 2002. And 550 acres that was conserved has been unconserved by the successors of Trend West. So will that be evaluated and backed out of the mitigations that are considered appropriate for this development if it were to go to
I'm not, based on what I know, because I haven't seen anything that shows conditions deleted or eliminated at this point. So it sounds like we need to have some follow-up discussions with you to make sure that we've got a good understanding of that, because I haven't seen that yet. I've seen references to the Ridge Agreement, but I haven't seen anything deleted or modified based on that. So let's have a follow-up discussion on that.
As far as rip that agreement up.
Okay.
And Suncadia is no longer following.
Okay, well, let's have a follow-up discussion on that. Then here and then there. Yes.
Yeah, I'm curious about the manufactured home community. Will people be buying their lots and owning the land, or will you be charging them rent and fees?
Question is, on the manufactured homes, is the intent at this point to have them be, you own the home or own the home and the land, or is it rental? What's the kind of the vision for the manufactured home component of this?
Yes, it's a land leased community. So they'll own their home and they lease the land. And part of us as a management company, we manage the community and clear the snow, cut the grass in the common areas, and support all the amenities.
I saw that, how well that worked for my mom, so I was just curious.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I have 3 questions, but they'll be really quick. So, one, is this a programmatic or project level SEIS? Since it's not application-based, and if it's programmatic, when are we going to be sure that the impacts are assessed on the final proposal? That's the first question. Second one, given that the size of this project could add a population equal to the Cle Elum, Roslyn, and Ronald, can we be assured that the EIS is going to look at impacts to all local communities, as well as to just Cle Elum and the surrounding area? And then the third question is, you'll get a lot of comments from folks, as part of this process about what should be studied and what shouldn't be. How will we know that those comments are being incorporated into your studies?
So 3 questions. The first question had to do, tell us more about the nature of the EIS, and is it going to be specific to the project, or is it going to be more general? We can respond to that. Are you going to be looking at impacts just in Cle Elum, or are you going to be looking at impacts on neighboring communities? And then the third part,
how will we know?
How will we know that the things and the concerns that we've been expressed are being incorporated into the scope? I can deal, actually let me just introduce and ask Richard to come forward. I'm going to introduce Richard in a minute, but as we were talking within the city about how best to manage this environmental impact statement and updating the environmental impact statement and analyzing the new alternative to make sure that it's done right, we said we need to have an expert. So Richard Wyman is one of the preeminent experts in the state on environmental impact statements and environmental analysis. Richard now works for the city on this project. I'm going to let Richard respond to all 3 questions having to do with the scope of the EIS, impacts on neighboring communities and comments that are made about the scope of the EIS.
Thank you. Let me answer the questions first, and then I'll come back and tell you more about my role in this. I'll answer the last one first. That's the only one I remember. So
I can repeat.
The city will publish a scoping summary that will essentially summarize all of the comments that are received tonight and through the rest of the scoping process. So you, any other reader, will be able to go back through the document and see if that issue was addressed. But just...
You mean in the final document, or?
In the draft.
Knowing it's part of the scope?
Knowing it's part of the scope means it will be addressed in the draft EIS.
I get that. Okay. Fully appreciate that.
So,
make sure it's part of the scope.
Yeah. So the other piece to remember is that the approach that the city is taking is to go back and review every issue that was evaluated in the 2002 EIS, update it where it's needed, supplement it where it's necessary.
Okay. My point being is perhaps there are new issues that have come up and should be included in the scope. What was originally scoped.
We've already included one new issue, greenhouse gas emissions. I don't think was included in the original scope. It's included in the new scope. If there are other issues, new issues, that come out of this process, they'll be included in the document, assuming they're significant. Second question is whether we're looking at regional impacts.
It's how far out are you looking at that?
As far out as we can identify impacts. So it's not limited to Cle Elum. It'll look at what's happening in the surrounding communities.
Particularly in Roslyn.
Yes. Any area that is arguably within the sphere of influence of the project will be evaluated. I mean, it is a requirement to look at impacts on adjacent communities. So that's included. Your first question.
It's a project EIS. It is analyzing the impacts associated with the master plan and with the modifications to the master plan.
It is a project EIS, but the project is a master plan. So it will be discussing impacts of the project, which is a master plan. So it's not going to be able to look at detailed engineering issues, for example.
As an example, in the discussions, there was a question about whether the RVs would be permanent residency or not, and the answer by Sun's consultant was, we're not sure yet. Wasn't quite that direct, but that's pretty much what he says. But you said, no, it wouldn't be. So that's an element of the project. Is that going to be studied in the EIS?
Okay, so I think Greg alluded to the dynamic process that is involved when you start early and when you're doing the master plan, as you're probably familiar with, Tom. Things change, and the document needs to change along with it. To the extent that the project changes. Final project will reflect
exactly what
the application. Yes.
No, or the draft was published, which people can.
Well, and just to clarify, there's two steps to this process. The environmental impact statement is going to analyze the impacts and provide us with information and provide us with recommendations. The master plan is what the document that the city would approve, or amendments to the master plan is what the city would approve, that says this is what you can do and this is what you can't do, and what you can do, here's how you're going to do it. So it's the master plan that will be the guiding document, and then there will be a development agreement, which is really a contract, which says in more detail what you can do, what you can't do, and how you're going to do it. So that's what ties it all together. At the end of the day, there's a contract, and that's what will be approved. If it's not in the contract, can't do it.
But the main thing is that that contract, whatever it is studied in the EIS. So that everybody, the public can know.
Yes. That's what is the basis of that contract. I'm going to go here, sweep back across, and then I do want to make sure that we have time for everybody to be able to get into the EIS. So I'll do kind of one sweep across. I'll start here, there, and there. Yes, sir.
So the original development agreement, was it a land lease type of proposal, or was it a fee simple type of development?
The question was, what was the original development agreement? The original development agreement applied to the 1,100 acres.
Correct.
And it still is in effect right now.
Yes, but that development agreement contemplated a certain amount of single-family homes, for instance. And I presumed all along that those were fee simple land sales.
Mm-hmm.
This appears to be completely different than that. Is that correct? The initial development contemplated the sale of individual lots within this complete landholding, correct? So, from my perspective, this is wildly different than that.
That's why there is a new alternative that's being studied. So there's two parts to the EIS. Update what we have and analyze the new alternative, because the new alternative is different than the one that was approved finally in the master plan. So we have to look at how do the changes, like you said, is it a significant change that the person doesn't own the land, they just own the house? Is that significant? If so, how? That's exactly what has to be discussed. I was going to go back there, and then I was going to go over here.
Commercial-wise, commercial development, as far as shopping, you know, whether it be Starbucks, whatever it might be, the city of Cle Elum, Roslyn, Ronald, are impacted heavily already by Suncadia as far as their shopping. What do you plan on doing as far as commercial property? Because I think there was 27 acres that were set aside for commercial property. Do you plan on a shopping center, commercial buildings to support everything you're bringing into the community? Because you've already made a huge impact on those folks that live in the Cle Elum, Rockland area, because it's my understanding, I could be wrong, is that Safeway is the only game in town. It's considered a resort, so they can raise their prices. So you're going to impact all the local people in town with that. What are your plans for that? And the second question would be, is how soon do you plan on developing? I've not heard that unless I've missed it. How soon do you plan on coming in here and developing this land?
Yeah, there was, I'll try to summarize, there was an expression of concern and a question. The expression of concern, was generally about the impact on businesses in the community and also about the availability of services or options, places to shop and things of that nature. The question was, what's in the plan and how is it going to affect that? My understanding is, and help me out here, my understanding is that the portion of this site that Sun is looking at buying from Suncadia would only be the residential portion, and that the portion of the site that was originally set aside for commercial is not being proposed to be changed at this point in time. That's my understanding.
So Suncadia would step up to the plate then and develop that commercial property, or is it going to be up to the people of Cle Elum, Roslyn, Ronald, and outlying areas to support all the growth that comes in here through the limited resources that they have?
The approved master plan has an area set aside for commercial development. My understanding is that Suncadia would retain ownership of that, and that would be developed by Suncadia but not by Sun Communities.
Is there a representative here from Suncadia?
Yes, there is. Yeah.
Back up the fact that they're going to support the growth that they're trying to propose today.
So I think during the breakout, if you have questions specific to Suncadia, we'll let you have an opportunity to do that. Also let us know, for those of you who've been through the process, if you have comments or insights. Because like Richard said, everything that you share with us is more that we know, and we'll make sure that gets addressed along the way. So I'm going to move right to here and then move over.
Let me answer my next question. When is this proposed to go through the new developers?
The new developer, in terms of the housing, that's over the next year. There's no proposal to develop the commercial.
No. When is the proposal for the new housing slated to go through the permit process?
The city cannot approve it until the environmental review has been completed. So it's going to be over the next year, but we have to complete the environmental review before we can complete the application process.
Does that environmental review also take into consideration there will be no apparently commercial with all this added population? Is that part of it, even though it's not a part of the acreage that they are purchasing?
Yeah, it is part of the approved master plan. It's not a part of the proposed changes.
It's not going to be involved in this at all, correct? I'm understanding that?
It is, if it was assessed in the initial environmental impact statement, so it'll be updated. But there's no changes to what was originally proposed. It'll be updated, yes. Let me go here, and I want to go over there, and then I want to get you to hear directly from the EIS folks. Yes.
Hi, I work for our school district. We've had a lot of people move in the last couple of years, this year particularly, and it's already having a big impact. We welcome new families, but I'm very curious if that was part of the 2002 impact. Was anyone looking then at the impact on our school district? Because I tell you, that has changed. We're in 2019. We have full classrooms. So I'm wondering if that's on the radar. I'm also wondering if the developers have set aside in all of this unused land, have they thought about setting aside anything for the new school buildings that will need to be built? Just curious if that's on your radar.
The question was on the radar does that include impacts to the schools, because the community's already experienced some significant impacts in schools. And the answer is yes. All that information will be updated. That's a good example of why we need to update the data and information, because there's lots happened since 2002. All of that relative to schools will be updated, and that'll be a part of the analysis. There's already been two things happened. Only two things happened since the original approval in 2002. The dedication of 175 acres for the horse park and the dedication of the school district of 35 acres for future expansion. So part of it's already happened, but the updating, yes, is part of it.
And impact on the horse park. That should be on there too.
Yes, those two have to go together. There's, where did I say, let's go here, and then maybe back there, and then I got to get to the EIS team. Yes.
I am extremely concerned to hear that they're not going to be developing any commercial. Right now, on weekends, particularly in the summer, people come into this area, we have lots of recreation, we know where to shop. And I just don't see how it is fair to the people in this community to bring more people in without addressing that.
Yeah. The concern was about how this development will impact shopping opportunities in the community. I think the question was, why isn't it a part of the project? And this gets a little bit confusing in that the master plan includes land for commercial development. It's just not the part. It's going to be implemented by two different companies, not one company. That's where it gets confusing.
But is it going to be implemented soon enough that these people do not come in?
Yeah.
And I'm not against more neighbors, but we have very limited shopping as it is. And
so the concern is a timing one. Is the commercial going to be available at the time of the residential development?
In the summer, you have to pick and choose when you can even go shopping, because there are just people everywhere. And now we're adding more to that.
Yeah.
One thing that we didn't say when we gave our
our introduction, is obviously this is a large project and it's going to take a lot of time. I would anticipate that to build out this site plan that we show here is probably going to take a decade. It's probably 10 years to build out. So it will progress slowly and over time. That's the first thing. The second thing, and I can't speak for the commercial because we're not acquiring that, but in general what happens, and again this is a general statement, not specific to here, that commercial follows rooftops. So as you add so many rooftops over the years, retailers come in and see a need and they put up the stores after the rooftops are there. And we see this all over the country. So residential typically precedes the commercial component, but again, it's going to take us 10 years to build it out, and I know that there's 20 plus acres, 25, 29 acres of commercial at Suncadia, and I can't speak for Suncadia, but I believe that they're going to offer it for sale to retailers. And to give you a sense, and again, this is a general statement, not about the Suncadia land, not about this project, a general statement about commercial development, you get about 10,000 square feet of retail for every acre. So if you have 25 acres, that's 250,000 feet of retail. I can't imagine that much retail ever being built in this area, but I think there's plenty of room. If retailers see an opportunity and want to come in, or a grocery store wants to come in, there's plenty of room. And again, that's a general statement. I'm not talking specifically here, but generally speaking, you get about 10,000 feet of commercial per acre.
Okay, someone I said yes. And then I'm going to have your question, then I want to make sure that the EIS folks talk. Also keep in mind that you'll have an opportunity to talk to Suncadia, to the SEIS team, city staff, but I want to make sure we get everything covered. So where are you? There you are. Your question.
The original master plan identified 50 affordable housing units. Are there still affordable housing units in this new development, or are those being rolled in under the manufactured homes?
Let me restate it. The original master plan called for the dedication of land to support the construction of 50 affordable housing units. And the question is that still on the plans and preliminary drawings that you've seen? And the answer is it's still on the plans and the preliminary drawings we've seen. There's going to be some more discussion about that to make sure that there's adequate access and things of that nature. But a requirement of the development agreement is that there has to be that dedication of land.
Can we really consider the manufactured homes affordable housing units when the land underneath them is not part
separate?
of the sale?
The 50 acres are separate, or the 50 units are separate. They're not within the manufactured housing ones.
So there are lots that are fee simple sales, as was discussed.
There's in the development agreement a requirement that land be dedicated to the city or another entity for the construction of 50 affordable housing units. That's separate from everything we've been discussing. And there's a specific provision in there that says you can't count the manufactured housing as that. Separate. Okay, I want to reintroduce Richard to talk about the EIS process, the updating and the new alternative, and also have then Richard introduce the team of consultants that's going to be working on and updating the environmental impact statement. And just so you know, one of the questions may be timing and whether some of the EIS consultants have already been out on the site to gather information before snow gets on the ground, so we make sure that we have good information. I'm going to turn it over to Richard and to Gretchen. You can talk about the process.
Thank you. So first, I really want to thank you all for your interest and your questions. The team is listening, and I think they've been informed by what they've heard. So I'm going to be very brief. I just briefly describe what my role is. It is to help the city manage the SEPA process. So it entails working with city staff, answering questions, providing direction, helping the public understand what this process is about, helping to manage the consultant team, ensuring that the documents that they produce are sufficient, complete, and informative. that's probably all I need to say about myself. I will be here near the boards to help answer any questions you may have about the State Environmental Policy Act process and what we're doing. I'm going to introduce Gretchen Bruner, who is who works for EA Engineering. Gretchen is the project manager for the SEIS, and she will tell you how the rest of the meeting is going to proceed.
Thank you. So my name is Gretchen Bruner, and I am with EA Engineering, and Rich Shapansky is also here with EA Engineering. He's going to be the project director on the project, overseeing the project as well. So we have several layers of people that are going to be part of this process. And we were selected by the city to prepare the environmental impact statement. We have a complete team of technical consultants that are going to assist us, from engineers to biologists to transportation consultants, air quality consultants, cultural resources. And many of the technical team members worked on the project in the past, so they're very, very familiar with the site and the area and the specifics of the project. As Greg said, several of the consultants are out on the site right now because they are doing further investigations to get ahead of the snow and make sure that they get on the ground and can provide valuable information to the master plan. We're preparing a supplemental EIS, as has been mentioned on by a couple different people. This is a document that supplements the 2002 Cle Elum UGA EIS, and so we are updating, building upon, and analyzing this new master plan in the document. I think Richard mentioned that we're going to be looking at all the elements that were analyzed in the previous EIS, and some of the handouts list those elements, and some of the subcategories of those elements, like public services we'll be looking at, and within that category is schools. And biological resources, we're looking at wetlands and the river and so on. We also have two alternatives that we're looking at in the document, one being the new master plan, and the other no action at this point if the master plan was to continue as approved. Tonight what we're doing is taking your input to the environmental impact statement, the supplemental EIS, and what you would like to see studied in it. And if you think that we are studying the right elements, the right alternatives, and if there's something about the process that you're interested in knowing more about. And so there are comment forms here. You can also make comments by email or snail mail. And we're also listening to what you're commenting about here at the meeting informally. And we've brought along several boards that illustrate the project, the vicinity of the project, the actual preliminary conceptual master plan, describing a little bit about what the SEPA process is, the three main steps. We're in the first stage, which is scoping. The second stage is the draft SEIS, where we prepare and conduct all the analyses and compose it into a document. We'll then take your comments again and respond to those and prepare a final SEIS. A little bit about how to provide comments. Let's see, what else do we have here? Process and schedule. I think people are asking a little bit about that. I think Greg mentioned that we're anticipating that the SEIS will take about a year, a little less hopefully, to prepare. The elements and alternatives, a little comparison of the previous or the original master plan and the current master plan as we know it right now. So we hope that you'll give us some good comments and partake in the refreshments as well, and we really appreciate your coming tonight. Are there any specific questions right now, or do you want to just...
Will there be more meetings?
Yeah, the question is, are there going to be more meetings? And the answer is yes. This is the first of at least a year of meetings. I was just doing some checking on the sign-in sheet, and there's more people than there's names on the sign-in sheet. So make sure you're on the sign-in sheet so that we can send you a note directly and say, here's the next meeting and here's what's going to happen.
How many people are here this weekend?
My guess is around 100, maybe a little bit more. Yes, sir, and then a couple more SEIS questions, and I want to give you a chance to talk to the folks.
I was wondering if the contractor that's proposing the development is putting aside funds, or the city of Cle Elum is already worked on infrastructure. As I know, being a resident here for not a long time compared to many, but at least 12 years, I know that 903, getting in the Safeway, doing all those things is a nightmare for folks. Has it been discussed, and is the contractor putting up funds, or are they charged per dwelling to improve that infrastructure?
The question has to do with the adequacy of the infrastructure, water, streets, roads, things of that nature, and what is the developer's obligation. Under the city requirements, the developer's obligation is to make sure that there is adequate infrastructure to serve their development and not to diminish the level of services in the community. So part of this review process, and before, as a part of what goes to the city council, will be an assessment of have adequate provisions been made or not, and what, if any, changes have to be made to that. So that's exactly going to be a part of the process. Couple more questions about EIS, and then I'm going to break and give you a chance to talk to folks directly. That's right here.
Where do we find the email and mailing address to send you comments as they come to mind?
The question is, how do we get you, if we want to send you email comments, on the comment sheet is a place where the email address, you can send it, take it home, give it to your neighbors. You can, any written comments we get tonight will be a part of the record, so you'll have that way. Also, there was a question about the original EIS. We'll make sure that that's available on the city website. For those of you that want to get in and read what was said before, you can, and that's where, as we go and update things, you'll be able to find all the updated things. Let me get a couple more on the general EIS, and then we're going to get a chance to talk to folks directly. Yes, sir.
Impact on I-90, is that going to be looked at?
Impact on I-90, is that going to be looked at? It was looked at before. It's going to be updated. Not only impact to I-90, but getting on and off I-90 is a concern, and it's going to be part of be coordinated with the county, because there's issues more than just the development that have an impact on that. So yes, let me go, gentleman in the white hat and the black hat. Perfect. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Will you guys provide hard copies of the original EIS so that folks that don't want to go online and try and go through that electronically?
The question is, we'll have to talk to folks about if we have hard copies. I know it'll be available online. Well, we can at least double check to see if there's copies in the library or something like that, but let me talk to the team and we'll report back to you on that. The question was, if we want to see a hard copy and we don't want to read it on a computer, is there a way to do that? Let us work on that one.
Yeah, I have two questions actually. One, it deals with economic vitality in the area. The other is commercial development. And I know you can't answer it for Suncadia, but you can answer for the city of Cle Elum and the principals that are involved. Can you tie this to the advanced development of the commercial? And what are you going to do about the economic vitality of the community, Roslyn and Cle Elum?
Yeah, the question has to do with economic vitality and how this project is going to affect the economic.
So what are they going to do to improve it?
They're going to improve it. There's certainly going to be some analysis on that. I think, there's going to be some discussion perhaps about what constitutes improving it.
So what about a citizens advisory committee?
Citizens advisory committee in general terms? Yeah. Haven't talked about that. What typically happens in a project like that is the city planning commission is the focal point for the public analysis and review, because the City Planning Commission has been appointed from the community to represent all of us, so typically that's what it is. Haven't talked about a special advisory committee, but we can certainly take that under advisement.
It's not really typical. Typically, what happens, because you want community involvement, you want community input, so what happens is you appoint a citizens advisory committee of interested parties in this group or other groups, and I think with that you'll get real input as opposed to, and you have more fiduciary.
Okay, so the comment was, just for everybody here, is that there may be a benefit to appointing a citizens advisory committee throughout the process of reviewing and looking at the application as a way of helping to get more involvement and to get another set of eyes on the project. And so that's the comment, and I'll kind of hold it at that. And I want to let you've been very patient. You get the last question.
Thank you. Will this project be phased in? And if so, what are the phases? And will there be an opportunity after each phase to weigh in on the impact?
Yeah, the question is, the project going to be implemented in phases? What are the phases? And is there going to be an opportunity to evaluate what occurred in the phase that was just completed before we go to the next phase? Great question. I think generally Howard said that their plan is to implement it over a period of time, which says to me to expect phases, but we haven't seen a specific phasing proposal. That's one of the questions the city is going to ask is, do you have a phasing plan, or are you going to provide one, and what is it? Because that may have a bearing on the analysis, some of the timing things that several of you have identified. So if there is going to be a phasing plan, then it has to be analyzed. It is not uncommon to have some review at the end of each phase, particularly to make sure that things that were committed to were done before you get to the next phase. That's very common. And so, excellent question. I'm going to break at this point because I do want to make sure we have an opportunity. The mayor is going to be available if you have questions. Mayor also was one of those that raised his hand. He was here. Lucy will be available if you have questions or comments. Gretchen and some of the EIS team will be here. Richard will be available. I'll be available. Howard and Kurt will be available. So if you have comments or questions, ask. Don't leave without leaving us with your email address. And do not leave without at least one, if not two, cookies. There's a comment box right there. Just get them close. Thank you very, very much. Don't leave without your comments. Don't leave without your email address. And don't leave without a cookie.
Hey, Elizabeth.
I saw your name.
Fiber of that makes it something that's a seasonal package. So anything past a seasonal package during 1 year, that would.
No, but that's what
So yeah, it's a little bit different in the leasing part of it.